Okay, let's get started. It's 2:01. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us in today's webinar on pollution reduction. This webinar is hosted by the Center for Sustainable Energy and Environmental Engineering at East Carolina University. My name is Carol Masara. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Construction Management at ECU. I am also the director of the coastal resilience at the center here at ECU. Our speaker for today is Mr. Mark Valencia, an environmental scientist with the Office of Sustainable Practices in Tennessee. Mark's prior experience includes surface, groundwater, conservation and monitoring, indoor-outdoor air quality, waste reduction and recycling, and native plant conservation. He assists with the Tennessee Sustainable Spirits Program, Sustainable Workplace Program, wastewater plant optimization program, and state government solid waste recycling measurement and reporting project. Mark holds a Bachelor of Science in Health Science with a concentration in environmental health from California State University, San Bernardino. Mark became interested in sustainability while assisting with the development of sustainable programs for the Southern California Native American tribe. Before starting this presentation, let me give some housekeeping. The webinar is recorded. Please make sure that your microphone is muted during the presentation. The webinar is divided into two parts. The first part, Mark is going to give us a presentation. Then we are going to have a Q&A session. So if you can save your questions until the end of the presentation, we would appreciate it. During Q&A session, you can either raise your hand, raise the hand icon to notify me for a question, or you can write it in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable doing. Any question before we get started? Okay, so thank you again for joining us, and now I will turn the platform over to you, Mark.
Great, thank you. And thanks again for having me. I'm always excited to talk about sustainable spirits and what we got going on over at the Department of Environment and Conservation. So I'll just get started and introduce myself and what's going on with sustainable spirits. So my office is, my name is Mark Valencia. I'm with the Office of Sustainable Practices. It's one of the few non-regulated organizations within the Department of Environment and Conservation. So I like to give full disclosure at the start of any meetings. I am not in the business of telling anyone what to do. I'm more in the business of helping out organizations, the communities, and just individuals who want to go above and beyond regulatory compliance. There's three divisions with the Department of Environment and Conservation. We have the Bureau of Environment, the Bureau of Conservation, and the Division of Stakeholder Engagement. So stakeholder engagement consists of a lot of organizations within TDEC that are, again, non-regulated. So this is some of the stuff that we have that works with most of our stakeholders throughout the state. So we have the general public, state and local, NGOs, state and federal agencies. What we do is we like to say we work with anyone within Tennessee. So our office is broken down to several other categories. So the Office of External Affairs. So these are the people who are out talking with the public all day, every day, and they are part of the 8 environmental field offices we have throughout the state. Office of Sustainable Practices, so that is the office I'm within. We do a lot of work, like I said, throughout the state, just improving sustainable practices with everyone. And then we also have a great organization, the Small Business Environmental Assistance Program, and we work really close with them, particularly with the Sustainable Spirits Program as well, working with small businesses, whether they have environmental compliance issues, environmental questions, Our organization with a small business can help them out and provide free confidential services for them and technical assistance. So the Office I'm in, sustainable practices, were broken down into three other categories. We have the business team, community team, state government institutions. So this is each little chunk of the state that we're trying to improve sustainable practices. So the Tennessee Sustainable Practices Program, which we're going to be talking about today, is within the business team. Our business team works with small businesses, large businesses. The Sustainable Spirits Program is a free membership recognition program for breweries, wineries, and distilleries in the state. We have a very similar program for large producers and manufacturers like Bridgestone, Nissan, big organizations like that called the Tennessee Green Star Partnership. So the Sustainable Spirits Program was born out of the Green Star Partnership Program. On the community side of things, this is where we work with uh, community organizations, educational institutions, so K through 12 education. We do a lot of other grant programs. So the Tire Environmental Act program, which is a grant program we oversee where we provide funding for anyone who can find a beneficial use for tires that normally would have been discarded or thrown out. And then our state government institution side, that's where I like to talk about. We do a lot of our back of house work. So this is higher education, state government. So we're trying to improve sustainable practices as a government whole within the state of Tennessee. Tennessee Sustainable Spirits is a voluntary program. Like I said, we assist wineries, wine growers, breweries, and distilleries in increasing sustainability by promoting best practices, providing technical assistance, and developing relationships. So today, that's what we're going to get nitty gritty with. We're going to talk about what we do in the Sustainable Spirits program and how it applies to sustainability for these producers. So benefits to becoming a member of our Sustainable Spirits program, you get this, like I said, we have unique branding. So if you look on the right, you can see this beautiful logo that we've developed for our members. So any of our members have free use of this logo. They can use it on whatever they like. I've seen them on product labels. They're on the Windows storefront. So we provide some marketing material they can use. So we have like a window cling so you can put it in your storefront to proudly display your membership into this program. They are marketed on our website, so we have an interactive map showing all of our members where they're located, and also breaks down what the sustainable practices that they are incorporating into their organization. We write articles on our members. Local media normally picks up on our members, and so every year we have a new member ceremony, and we usually have local media pick up, and it's free, recognition for our members. And we've had news stories done on our members and what they're doing. One of the big things I like to promote is we do provide technical assistance. So when you become a member, we actually write up a sustainability report for our new members, and there's going to be some recommendations, and I'm going to talk about that further later. But with that, we provide technical assistance. So if you ever want to pursue any recommendations or you have questions regarding to sustainability, we can do some of that initial legwork on the technical assistance side for our members. Like I said, every year we have a new member recognition event. So that's when we like to welcome all our new members in the program. We do a press release. That's where we get their names out. And again, we also have a large resource online for our members and for anyone in general. So if you go to our webpage, you can actually see some of the things we have going on. We have specific resources for producers. We have resources for home brewers, and we have resources for just individuals who are looking for a sustainable producer. So we have some guidelines on how to be on the lookout for sustainable producers. And, a lot of this stuff can be applied to other businesses as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be sustainable spirits producers. So with membership, you got to fulfill a certain criteria to become a member. Um, this involves, water conservation, reducing pollution, whether it's air or water, increased waste reduction, expanded community involvement. I like to emphasize pollution prevention is a really big focus on our program, and mainly because, we are a P2 grantee. So with the EPA, we're part of the pollution prevention grant. And so a big source of our funding comes from the pollution prevention grant. So we want to make sure not only this is a beneficial program for our members, but it's also beneficial to the environment and reducing pollution. So application, There's a lot of bullet points right here, but I like to say it's really low impact. There's a couple things that I want to mention that there's a little bit of legwork you may have to do, but initially it's fairly simple. So we have a application you have to submit, and this is, one page application that covers, name, location, things like that. Um, you also have to submit a checklist. So this checklist is where we actually focus on what you're doing sustainably speaking. So it's broken down to several categories, like I said, air, water, waste, and we'll go into more detail that later. But I want to just mention right now, there's 49 elements to this checklist. So it's almost like a check, you just check the box to say if you do this or you don't do it. You have to meet a minimum of 25 of the items you have to have checked off on your checklist of the 49 that are listed. In addition to that, we do ask that our members submit utility and production data every year. Initially, we like to use this as a baseline so we can produce uh, energy use ratios and water use ratios. And this is just showing our members, for example, how much water it takes to produce a gallon of beer. So, if they submit all this utility and production data, we can show them uh, number wise. For example, it may take you 5 gallons of water to produce 1 gallon of beer, or it may take this many kilowatt hours of energy to produce a gallon of your product. This is a way to normalize the data, and it's a great way to compare yourself amongst your peers and other producers throughout the state or the country. These use ratios, we actually compare them to some national and international data that's provided by other organizations, so we can show our members where they stand amongst maybe their size and where they stand amongst, producers throughout the world or even throughout the country. It's a great way I like to show to our members. It's a great way to look at your overhead. I like to show our members that this is a way you can see exactly how much energy it's costing you or how much water it's costing you to produce your product. Especially if you establish a baseline with us, then we can track through time how much you're actually reducing throughout the years, or maybe it's gone up. But it's a great way to see how much it costs in water and energy for our producers. And our side, with the state, it shows exactly how much resources are being used up and how we can reduce resource consumption within the state. So that's the big three: the application, the checklist, and the utility data. That's the big three things we need to start the initial process of becoming a member into our program. After we get that information, we will review the application, we'll review the data, and we'll review the checklist. So we're going to go over there, make sure everything's verified and we have what we need. We're also going to submit this information into our TDEC internal compliance just to make sure there's no outstanding regulatory issues that an applicant may have. And if there is a regulatory issue, or if there may not be in compliance with a certain thing, they can't become a member, but doesn't mean that they're out forever. We usually will let them know, hey, you have some outstanding issues. Once you fix that, you can come and join us. And I'm not going to just leave it at that. I'll make sure that these applicants are into contact with who they need to contact within Department of Environment Conservation to see what they need to do to come back into compliance. And usually we can also forward them off to our Small Business Environmental Assistance Program, where they can provide some of that free, confidential technical assistance to make sure they become compliant within Department of Environment Conservation. Again, I'm not in the business of telling anyone what to do, so I can't, tell anyone you need to do this or do that. So if there is anything regulatory, I'll get them into contact with the correct people. Once we do all that information, they pass the compliance check, then we will schedule an on-site visit. With this on-site visit, I like to say it's not super invasive. What we're going to do is we're going to take that checklist they filled out. We're going to walk through their facility and verify what they have checked off is there. And normally, when we do these walkthroughs, I usually can find additional checks that they can be checking off on the list that they didn't even think about. So it's a great way to establish a baseline of what's going on in this facility and see how we can improve sustainability. Again, we're just going over there, taking notes on the checklist. I'll make some observations, which I will take notes on, because I will take all this information back, create a sustainability report for our members. So through that walkthrough, I may identify some areas of opportunity. So with the sustainability report, we're going to produce the data that we collected from them, show them their energy use ratio, their water use ratio. We're going to talk about what they're doing currently on the sustainability side, and then we're going to list off recommendations. And in these recommendations, we usually categorize by low-hanging fruit to harder applications or ways that can improve uh, the checklist on add checks to their checklist. With these recommendations, again, they're recommendations. They don't have to do anything with them, but I like to make sure they understand there's areas of opportunity for them. And if they ever want to pursue it, that's where we can provide some of that free technical assistance. So any of the recommendations we make, if they're interested in pursuing any of those recommendations, we can do some of that legwork to help them figure out how they can implement those recommendations. Once we get all that information, we write up that report, we submit it to our applicants, and we let them know that they're accepted into the program. And they'll be listed on our website. They'll have free access to the logos we developed for them. They have access to us if they have any technical assistance questions as well. So to get a little deep into the checklist, there's 4 pages. So there's 2 pages you see right now, and there'll be 2 more. The only thing I just want to point out is it's broken down into categories. You can see that there's water, air, waste listed on here. So you're literally just walking through your facility and you're checking off these items that you have going on at your facility. One thing I do want to point out though, there's if you see, there's 2 checklist items that are bold. In water, there's a quarterly leak check, and in waste, there's recycling. So these I like to say are prerequisites where you have to at least the very minimum be incorporating these practices at your facility. And these are very minimally invasive practices, and there's something that any producer can do, whether you're making wine, beer, or distilled spirits. You can be incorporating these practices. Again, this checklist is pretty broad because we're working with different producers. Distilling is quite different from making wine, so we want to make sure that these checklists is applicable to all of the producers in the spirits industry. And that's why we work very closely with our members to approve upon this. So every year we like to survey our members and see what's going right, what needs work fixing, and if we ever want to change this checklist to make it more stringent, it can always evolve, but it has to be approved through our members. Because again, we want to make sure this program is designed to be beneficial not only to the environment, but to our members as well. So like for example, for one of the prerequisites, if you're looking at the water, we just mentioned you do quarterly leak checks. So this is something that everyone's doing currently. If you're walking through your facility, you're looking for leaks, whether it's a water leak, a sewer leak, you're gonna notice a leak and you're gonna fix it. This is just making it more formal. You're actually going out of your way to formally recognize that you're checking for leaks. And this just is a way to reduce, water use, potential pollution issues, things like that. Waste, again, is super simple. We're just asking to do recycling. If, recycling is different throughout the state and what options are available, but you can at least recycle one product at your facility. These are the last few pages of the checklist. So now we're covering energy, sourcing. So we're seeing if you can source locally produced ingredients. Again, this is a way to reduce, pollution through transportation. We may not be able to produce every ingredient a producer may need. So, for example, winemakers, they take varieties of grapes from all over the world. And we in Tennessee can't grow all of those types of grapes. But you can at least produce one product with locally sourced ingredients. So there are some type of varieties of grapes that can be grown in Tennessee. So if you're producing one product that's at least sourced from 50% locally sourced ingredients, you can check that off on your list. Another example is locally sourced packaging material. Again, we may not be able to manufacture within the state of Tennessee the packaging that you need that's required for your products. But if you can at least source some of these product materials within 500 miles of the state, we're trying to reduce, the transportation associated with packaging materials. Community. A community is another big uh, element to sustainability. So this is involving your organization within your local community. This is a way to keep the community involved and educated on, environmental concerns and pollution. A lot of our members do a pickup for a pint program, which is, they get the community involvement where they go out and they pick up trash for the day. And, after they pick up trash, they get a free pint of beer or, a free glass of wine for, cleaning up the community. It's a great way to involve the community. It's a great way to educate the community on environmental issues. And it's a great way, to reduce, trash in your community. Maintenance is another big factor to focus on as well. So, if you have a routine maintenance program on your equipment, that ensures that your equipment is not only running efficiently, but it's not leaking oil. It's running efficient to the point where you're not wasting energy to run your equipment. So some of the next steps that we have coming on with the Sustainable Spirits program, we're always looking to increase membership. That's a great goal because, like any goal, we want all the producers in the state of Tennessee to be part of this program because we want to make sure we're being proactive with reducing pollution and improving sustainable practices. We're always looking for feedback, so our members, we seek feedback from our members and stakeholders involved. So if anyone ever looks at some of our resources, I love input. I want to make sure we're making a program that's beneficial for the state and is beneficial for our producers. And we're always looking for additional resources. So like I said, if you look at our website, we have a ton of resources and we want to be able to build upon that and keep producing great resources for our members. Some of the things we're working on right now is actually value stream mapping for our members. And on the next slide, I think we'll discuss that a little bit. So value stream mapping, this is just a rough example, but we're looking at from maybe grain to glass or grain to fermenter. So that's taking your raw materials and looking at the process involved to get it to your fermenter or get it to a finished product and what's associated with that, whether it's energy, pollution, water consumption. So if we look at this example right now, we're looking at, delivery of grain for a brewery. So a truck pulls up, drops off that grain. So that grain has to somehow get from a pallet to your warehouse or from the truck into a silo. So let's say, for example, this grain is going to be moved into a silo. Well, there's some electric motor that is moving this grain into the silo. So how long is that electric motor running? And then we'll also take the details of that electric motor so we can show exactly how much energy it costs to move that grain from that truck into that silo. And then from there, we can go to the next step. So we'll go from that silo, that grain has to get milled. So there's an electric motor moving the grain to the mill. There's an electric motor that is processing that grain and crushing it. So right there's two processes where we know the time it takes to move the grain to the mill, and we know how long it takes to mill that grain. So whether you're using a stopwatch or you have, predetermined sets of times that you know how long it takes, we can get pretty, I'm not going to say extremely accurate, but we can get really accurate numbers on the energy required for those processes. If we want to go a little deeper, we can look at mash. So this is when you take the milled grain and you move it into a mash tun where you're adding hot water. It's going to steep like a tea for, an hour or however predetermined time. So there's energy to heat the water. You know how much water you're using, and there's usually an electric motor that's moving around in there during that process. So then we can actually look at the energy associated with the gas use, whether you're using a steam boiler or you're using a direct fire system. You can even use an electric element, and we can get the information on that as well. We're looking at an electric motor that's either moving it to the mash tun, and the mash is actually mixing, and we know how much water it takes. So then we can go through this whole process of value stream mapping and map out all your taxes, your energy inputs, your pollution outputs, and your water inputs. So we can map out and show you where the biggest energy resources are in your process. So I like to show our producers, this is a way to map out what costs you the most money. And in our end, it maps out what uses the most energy. That's, again, we're trying to improve efficiencies to reduce the consumption of our resources and, ultimately reduce some of the pollution associated with energy use just in general. This is a little more detailed example of value stream mapping. So we just developed guidelines for value stream mapping, and it's going to be on our website here in the near future. So look out for it. And the guidelines are just showing producers what it takes to do, what it takes for value stream mapping, and what the ultimate goal for value stream mapping is for a producer. This is just similar to the map I showed you in the previous slide, but this is actually giving you spaces to put down all the information you need. So for example, you see grain milling. We show how much time does it take to run that mill. the equipment use hours, so how long it takes how long you're running a specific piece of equipment. For that example, would be an electric motor, and then we provide a space to show you to input what is labeled on your electric motor. The volts associated with the amps associated with that particular piece of equipment. And then in the red, we will show you the kilowatt hours associated with that particular process. So we're just showing in a step-by-step manner how to get from this electric motor to actually how much kilowatt hours it takes per each process. That's that's in the nutshell everything I have going on with the sustainable spirits. I like to not get super talky. I'd rather, if we have questions, provide time for people to ask questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Any question from the audience? Yes, we have one question. Anna?
Hi, yeah. So my question was, you mentioned during the walkthroughs you would find, your observations, you would find things that they could do better that were often overlooked on the checklist. And I was just curious about if there are specific things that are often left off of the checklist. If you give examples.
Yeah, absolutely. So a big thing I'll notice when you walk through a brewery, um, so the process, I have to get a quick little overview of the brewing process. So you take grain, you put it in hot water and steep it like a tea to extract the sugar. From there, you separate that sugary liquid from that grain, and you boil it for a predetermined time. So during that boiling process, you're heating this liquid up. After you boil it, you actually have to cool it down to around roughly room temperature so you can add yeast to this sugary liquid. The yeast is doing all the work to turn that sugary liquid into, alcohol. Um, we Brewers like to cool it down as rapidly as possible because you don't want to give this sterile product the opportunity for other bacteria or yeast to get into your beer, which may impart a different flavor of what you're going for. You want your yeast to be the main focus in that beer. So usually when you cool down that liquid, you run it through some kind of heat exchanger. A lot of these producers will actually run domestic water through a heat exchanger to cool off this liquid. Well, your effluent would just be this your water from your normal water tap. It's coming out as a hotter temperature, and a lot of these brewers or can just discard this into the sewer system or down the drain. I like to point out that you can use this preheated water, which hasn't been touched by anything, for your next batch of beer that you're making, reducing your energy bill because you have this preheated water that you can use and not use up as much energy to heat it up even more. You can also use that as a cleaning source. So some of these producers are actually trapping this water and not even thinking about the fact that they're saving energy and it's a sustainable practice that they're not even thinking about. They're just thinking, hey, I could save some money by reducing my energy bill by recouping some of this preheated water. So that's a good example I like to show that a lot of the thing I like to mention, mainly because I'm a home brewer. The hobby is expensive, so we try to find any way we can cut corners to reduce the cost for us. So a lot of this stuff is already ingrained in our brain and we're not even thinking about it. So I like to point that out. And, I like to point out, say, if you're still discharging some preheated water, you can probably use it in other practices as well. So that's one of the examples I like to show. I'm like, you're doing great already. You just haven't recognized that it's a sustainable practice. You may be seeing it as, a cost saving perspective, but it's also sustainable. It's a sustainable practice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. We have a couple of questions in the chat. People are asking about the checklist. Is it available or to download, or if you have sample of that checklist?
Yes, absolutely. So that checklist is on our webpage. Anyone can take a look at it. Our application and our checklist is available through our website. So if you want to get to our website, feel free to shoot me an email, and I can get it over to y'all.
Okay, great. Another question in the chat. Thanks for the presentation, Mark. Do your program lean on the Brewers Association Sustainability Energy Water Guides and resources too, at least to breweries?
So yes, I work closely with the sustainability ambassador at the Brewers Association. When we first started the program, I relied heavily on them to take a look at some of our products and provide some resources as well. Again, a lot of those products produced by the Brewers Association is exclusive to members, so I don't like to use all of their products unless I have, explicit permission by them. I do recommend it to any brewery who's interested in looking for additional resource. If they are a Brewers Association member, I definitely send them that way as well. But they are a great resource. Even if you're not a brewer, there is helpful information in all those resources as well.
Okay, great. Another question, how many members do you currently have and what is the membership fee, or at least the range, as it probably depends on the brewery size?
So our membership is entirely free. It's free for any producer within the state of Tennessee. Being a government agency, we don't really like to take money. Again, our resources are funded through the pollution prevention grant that the EPA provides. So that's kind of where we get our funding for. Again, overall goal for the Department of Environment and Conservation is to reduce pollution, reduce regulatory issues associated with manufacturing. So uh, I like to say it's a way for everyone to save money, and on our end, it's a way to reduce pollution and improve the environmental concerns. So again, it's free for anyone within the state of Tennessee, and right now we have around 8 or 9 members in our program currently, and that ranges from breweries, wineries, and distilleries to some of the largest distilleries in the state, to even the smallest distillery in this one. I'm not gonna say the smallest, but to a small size distillery, and on the brewery side as well. So it ranges. We have some small producers in every sector of the spirits industry to some of the largest producers.
Okay, thank you, Rob. I will come back to you. I still have a couple of questions in the chat. Does your program also focus on waste and water conservation? This includes measuring the water-beer ratio and looking into reducing high-strength discharge to the POTW?
So one of the questions we do ask all of our producers is, are they working with their wastewater treatment operator? So I want to make sure that they understand that their effluent is meeting the requirements by their wastewater treatment operator. And if not, we encourage them to talk to them to see if their effluent can get to where they need to. Depending on their size, they're probably already talking to their wastewater treatment operator, mainly because their discharges might be uh, for example, the pH may be too high or too low for the load. So they may be already required by the state or by their wastewater treatment operator to do some pre-treatment. We like to make sure that they are, talking to them, and if they have any questions, we can get them into contact with them, or we can provide some of that technical assistance, just a high level view of what effluent is and what they need to do if they want to make sure they're providing an effluent that their wastewater treatment operator can handle. We do look at their water use ratio. So we look at, again, early on we were talking about utilities. So when we ask them to submit their annual utility data, that's their annual water usage and their annual production. So again, we want to show, hey, it takes you 5 gallons of water to produce a gallon of beer or something like that. It's a great way to see exactly how much resources is required to produce your products.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Connie. Once a facility is accepted into the Sustained Spirits program, is there a time frame that it goes for, and then they need to reapply or do more items on checklist? For example, continuous improvement?
So on the continuous improvement side, we do ask that our members produce every year. They have to submit their production data and their utility data. So again, we're looking at the water use ratio and the energy use ratio, and we'll compare it to the baseline for the year of when they first joined. So we're always comparing them to their baseline year to show how much improvement they've done or have not done we haven't required any continuous improvement on it, but we want to show them where they stand compared to their baseline year. A good example of not making a requirement has been COVID. So because of COVID, utilities use ratios have changed drastically. You know, a lot of these producers, they had to close their tap room, or they had to, you know, throttle back on production. And a thing with these producers are, um, the more efficient you are is when you're producing more. So your efficiency goes up as you produce more. When you're throttling back, you may not be as efficient as you were previously. So you're going to see a dip in some of those ratios. It may not be a bad thing, you know, it may just mainly been because, you know, they hadn't had to produce as much. But, you know, we would like to always see continuous improvement, and we're talking to our current members to see we like to say that this program is designed to evolve, you know, like a LEED certification for a building. Those requirements change every so many years, and we want to be able to do that with our program as well. But we want to make sure that this is something that our members agree to, because we don't want to just pull the rug out from underneath them as they become a member for 1 year. We completely change the rules and then they're out the next year. So we want to make sure this is something that's beneficial to everybody.
Okay, thank you. Last question in the chat. How do you attract new membership to fill in the checklist? Do you go to them in person, or how does that work?
Everything. So I spent a good majority of my time actually traveling the state, talking to producers. We'll be at, you know, local events, you know, whether it's, you know, the Tennessee Farm Wine Growers Alliance has a meeting, or they have a conference every year. We want to make sure we're there. We're talking to our producers. You know, we do make cold calls every year. We take an intern, and one of their projects is to identify the newest producers in the state and reach out to them. So it's, you know, we do emails, we do phone calls, we host webinars. So every year we do 2 webinars on education, and we like to use that as a great resource for any producer in the state. So it's open to anyone throughout the country, more or less. All our webinars are free for everyone to join, but it's also a great way to show members within the state, or producers within the state, what kind of resources we provide and services we provide. So it's another way to advertise what we have going on with the Sustainable Spirits program.
Okay, great. Rob, I think you have a question.
Yes, thank you. So I'm part of a team that's getting ready to start our own sort of program in Massachusetts, and I've watched and looked around a little bit around the U.S. to see some different programs, and I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the idea of what does membership mean exactly? What is the sort of, I guess, bar to be considered a member? I'd also love to know a little bit about how, if at all, is there a recognition sort of piece, and is there like a scoring method per se, and just the thought process behind how you formulated that structure of your program would be really helpful to hear a little bit about.
Sure thing, and thanks, Rob, for that question. That's a great question, and if you have more questions after this, feel free to reach out to me anytime. But so the scoring system, you know, we outweighed the scoring system versus a checklist system. You know, like LEED certification, you know, that there's a scoring system that's really stringent. This program is fairly new. It's fairly new throughout the country. You know, other states are doing similar things like this. I think that it's not as robust as a LEED certification program, which we would like. But again, this is something that's still in its infancy, and we like to evolve it. So currently, it's a checklist program. So requirements to become a member, like I said, is provide your utility data every year, provide your production data every year, and then the checklist. So the checklist, there's 49 elements to that checklist that I showed you. To become a member, they have to meet a minimum of at least 25 of those items on the checklist. So they have to reach the 25 threshold to become a member, and that's what we do every year with them. So that's kind of how it was born. Our program was born out of, you know, that the scoring system was, you know, kind of designed through that LEED certification. We hope one day it can evolve to a scoring system. I would like to, but it has to get that notoriety throughout the state. It has to get that buy-in from our members, and we have to show that it's a beneficial use to them. So if they ever want it to be more robust, that's up to our members, and we got to work with them to see what that would entail. This also was born out of the Kentucky Sustainable Spirits program. So our counterparts Up north in Kentucky, they've been doing a lot of great stuff, and I learned a lot from them, and that's kind of how this evolved out of it. We have a very similar program within the state for our state park system, which is the Go Green With Us program, where it's actually all of our state parks are part of it. It's a sustainability membership program, but much like this, but it's a scoring system, and it kind of inspired us to see what we can do on the industry side. Also, this is a free thing, so no one's required to be part of it. But so we want to make sure that this program was beneficial to our producers, and it's a great way to recognize our producers in the state that are going above and beyond just regulatory compliance within the state. Did that answer your question, Rob?
Yes, thank you. I guess my one last thought is it's just really interesting to consider what, if any, sort of differentiation is there. And I know that that's a really tricky thing. And it seems like you aren't able to do that yet, but at some point, maybe in the future, that might be a consideration. I'm sure there are pros and cons to it.
Are you talking like a tier system, like a gold?
Yeah, or like if you have a point system, obviously someone has 90 points and someone has 75, you can see a difference. Or if you had, yes, like a bronze, silver, or gold or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that, to where we have a tier system, but currently it's just, you're in or you're out.
Yep.
Once we get more buy-in, we can probably do that. We can break it down further. I would love to do that as well. I think one of the big things, though, that we show our producers is their ratios, their energy use ratios and their water use ratios. They can compare that to what other organizations are doing throughout the state or throughout the country and the world sometimes. That's a great way just to show, hey, my little distillery, I'm running just as efficient as, a large distillery in another country. That may not be a recognition part of it, but it's a way for them to see where they stand and where they fall into terms of, resource consumption.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, no more question to Mark? Oh, Rob, he still have other question? Yes, go ahead.
I figure there's 1 minute left, and if nobody's going to use
sure.
it, I'll go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd be really curious to find out how, if at all, can you differentiate or separate the utility use for a production facility that also has a taproom space? I'm wondering if most of those businesses would have separate metering or some other method, because it seems to me that that could mess a little bit with the production water use per barrel or water or energy use per barrel or something.
Oh, absolutely. We make a note in all of our membership reports where this ratio was born of. So say taproom is connected to it. We emphasize that your results may vary depending on where you're separated out. Most of the recommendations, we do recommend that they try to be able to install sub-meters, for water and energy if they have something associated with their building, whether it's a tap room, office space, things like that. A big chunk of, water consumption and energy consumption is still going to come out of your production facility. So it's not going to be too detrimental from your taproom side, but we do make a note that your taproom space normally on a smaller producer normally isn't separated out from production side. So we do make a note of that in the reports. And if they, some of our members actually, we've had one of the technical assistance reports we did recommend to one of our producers was install sub-metering, for the water and energy. And they actually pursued that because they did want to see how much overhead is associated, with back of house versus front of house operations.
Great, thanks again.
Okay, we have 2 more questions in the chat. First question is, what about raw water quality? Is there a concern, and do you advise about testing, filtering, etc.? Also, do you advise about cleaning products, toxicity, and effectiveness?
So on the water side, raw water, that is entirely up to the producer and the requirements they may have when it comes to, they are going to be overseen by local health departments, and they are going to be overseen by local agriculture as well. So that's entirely up to them and their product. Filtering is definitely a concern for a big part for brewers. They want to have a clean water profile, or they want to understand what exactly is in their water to build a profile dependent on the recipe of the beer they're making. It's not a requirement on our end. And if it is a food safety concern, it's already being overseen by local health departments and some other various organizations that is not environment conservation. So I couldn't make recommendations on filtering or raw water of that nature. What was the second? Oh, cleaning. So cleaning practices. We've hosted several webinars on cleaning in place. So clean in place is a concept for these large producers where the cleaning practices happen on site. Usually they have systems designed to clean a vessel where it stands. There are very stringent practices and operating procedures for these producers, mainly because they don't want to get an infection. And when we talk about an infection, it's not a health infection, it's maybe an infection by a yeast that may impart a flavor they weren't going for. So there are standard chemicals that are used, but we host ways that you can use clean in place practices to reduce the amount of chemicals you're using, whether you're using agitation or increasing water temperature to reduce the amount of chemicals you're using, and also recouping some of this uh, usage of water for the next program, for the next. So a quick example is, say you have two fermenters you're cleaning. When you initially clean that fermenter, you're going to go through a process where you rinse off the fermenter with water. You're going to use some kind of solution, whether it's a base or an acid, to clean it. And then you'll do another final rinse with an acid or a water to just completely rinse it off. So when you do that final rinse, you can actually recover that water that you use to just rinse off a fermenter, recoup that water, and use it to rinse off the next vessel for its initial rinse. So this is not a post rinse, but an initial rinse. It's a way to recoup the water and reduce chemical usage as well. So there are practices in place for that. We've hosted webinars on it, and one of the ideas for this year is actually developing SOPs for clean in place practices, or just learning about how you can create your own SOP with the emphasis on reducing chemical use or resource use as well.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Anna. Are your webinars available online?
Yes, all of our webinars we host is available on our webpage. So if you'd like to find those webinars, shoot me an email and I can send you the links. But all of them are listed on our webpage of each webinar we've done. So like I said, we do 2 every year. So as soon as it comes out, it's usually about a week after the webinar, it'll be produced. It'll be on our website for access.
Okay, any other questions? What
Mark,
is the web page link?
Web page link. Let me see if I can get that for you. I'm going to stop sharing. Did I stop sharing?
Yes, you did.
Okay, let me get the link for you real quick. Oh, it's in the chat?
Is it in the chat? Okay.
Perfect.
Oh, okay.
And Mark, your contact information, is that available on the website or something?
Yes, it is. My email is just mark.valencia@tn.gov.
Rob, do you still have a question? Any other question for Mark? Okay, thank you so much, Mark. That was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.